that was the beginning of saying yes to new things. And because I was so great at building community, and honestly, I needed a community that I could pour into, I started what we would call now a female mastermind. And it was professional women in Chicago. And it was, we would take because I was very much in my personal growth journey and taking all these different books and so that's what it became. And we would meet monthly. The group grew to over 150 women in Chicago in my beautiful, tiny little living room. And I started saying yes to more things that were completely outside my realm.
Hello, today I have my friend Dr. Neeta Bhushan on Plenty, and she wrote this book, That Sucked, Now What? She is an incredible coach, an investor. She is a light in the world. And today we talk about resiliency, how to not get stuck in your suck, the difference between privilege and entitlement, her incredible story of becoming an investor, leaving. I'm not even going to get into it. Her story is amazing and you must listen. So enjoy the episode if you want to work on your resiliency. Welcome to Plenty. I'm your host, Kate Northrup, and together we are going on a journey to help you have an incredible relationship with money, time, and energy, and to have abundance on every possible level. Every week, we're going to dive in with experts and insights to help you unlock a life of plenty. Let's go fill our cups.
Please note that the opinions and perspectives of the guests on the Plenty podcast are not necessarily reflective of the opinions and perspectives of Kate Northrup or anyone who works within the Kate Northrup brand.
Hi, Neeta.
Hi.
Thanks for coming on Plenty.
Oh my God, I'm excited.
I'm so happy to have you here. Really loved your book.
Yeah.
So, I just know you from Instagram, and then we met that one time when I came
And we had so much fun.
to your work home, which inspired our work apartment, which is so cool.
I'm so impressed.
Well, when I rolled up for your podcast, The Brave Table, I was like, oh, so I guess I'm at their house. And then I walked in and I was like, they clearly do not live here. And
There's no kids stuff here.
Well, yeah, this is not the house of people with two small children and sets set up everywhere. And you were like, yeah, this is our content house.
Yeah.
And then that separation was so brilliant. So anyway, thank you, because it is in part thanks to you that this exists.
You are so welcome. And I love it. I feel so at home here.
I'm so glad. So I started reading your book, and for audio listeners, it's called That Sucked, Now What? And I had no idea that you had such an intense period of time.
Oh, yeah.
From the age of 14 to 25? I'm sure there are many intense times in your life.
But yeah.
We're getting to know each other. But
Yes.
Would you, because some people who write a book called That Sucked, Now What? It's more theoretical.
Right.
I stubbed my toe, or I got fired, which is all.
Right.
I don't get to decide what impacts people in an intense way. Your story is really intense. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if you would be willing to share with our listeners what that period of time included for you. You can just do bullet style.
Bullet points.
Or you can get into it, whatever you feel like today.
Yeah. Wow. So you're right about the amount of time. I think it was really half of my life.
Yeah.
To be honest. It's wild to think now, at 41.
Ooh.
That
radiant.
Well,
I would like to say.
Thank you.
So are you a 1983 baby too?
82.
82. Okay.
82. We're just letting it all out.
I'm an 83. Mike's an 82.
Well, it's funny, when I was in an Uber, and the Uber driver, he would not let up on asking how old I was.
Why?
I was like, well, you don't ask that to a woman, don't you know? I was just coming back from Europe, just the other day. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm owning it all. owning it all. And, so he was like, well, you look like you're in your 20s. I'm like, thank you. That's the Asian genes.
Yeah. They're strong.
They're strong.
The collagen is amazing.
The collagen is strong.
We'll get to, first we're going to start with the intense beginning of your life, and then we're going to move on to skincare.
Skincare, yes. So if you're watching this, I mean, yeah, looking at me now, I don't think you could ever think that I went through such a super, super dark, painful, awful, crazy, excruciating time growing up. And, I think rightfully so, you say about 14, but I feel like it kind of started when I was 10, when my mom was diagnosed with, breast cancer. And so I remember having chicken pox. My great-grandmother, bless her soul, she was on duty to take care of me. And nobody told me that, my mom was just going to the hospital. They took everyone with, and my great-grandmother was, she was the one watching me, and I had chicken pox. So, shout out to calamine lotion back in the day. The pink bottle will forever be etched in my mind.
Yeah.
But I remember, with all of my welts, and I'm just itching, and no one told me that the whole family was just going to be, so the memory in my mind was, okay, I'm waking up, I have all these welts, and I'm itching like crazy. And my great-grandmother, who does not speak any English, Filipino, she's like, Anak, you put this on all of those things, and she didn't want to touch me. So I was like, so you would not itch. And I was like, okay. But so that day I made a meeting in my head that, okay, I have to take care of myself. And so that would be the beginning of this journey of growing up really fast. Yeah. And yes, later they did tell me my mom had breast cancer, and this was a period of about 6 years. In and out of hospital settings. She transitioned when I was 16, and then 17, at 17, a year later, literally, it was probably, it was about a year to the date after my mom transitioned. My brother, DJ, he had an asthma attack at school. And so he transitioned. And now that I know a lot about energetics and spirits and relationships, he was the one closest to my mom. So, that has been cathartic to kind of know, obviously, everything I know now about that. But during that time, it was devastating to my dad, who is this Punjabi, Indian, strict dad who didn't know anything about emotional intelligence. I mean, we were really in survival mode for a lot of that time. And I think even to our extended family, culturally, there's no place for a traditional Indian man to fit in as a widow. So it just was very strange in all the dynamics. And I was the oldest woman of the house. So that meant a lot of responsibilities. And for those of you who are oldest daughter syndrome, you're already trying to do all of the things. And so that just led me on this trajectory, which then 2 years later, my dad would be diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And so, literally in the span of those 4 really big years, by 18, I was an orphan. And, really the caretaker of my youngest brother, who was 14 at the time. So, there's a chapter in my book called, the chip on your shoulder. And that was really what I had in my late teens. I was fierce and ferocious, and I'm like, no one's going to pity us. And that was kind of what I was charging into my 20s with, just because I did have a hall pass, if you think about it.
Forever.
Yep. Oh, she's been through all of this. Oh, okay, sure, Yeah. And I just didn't. I was willing to then overcompensate.
And what did overcompensation look like for you?
Oh gosh. Well, I was constantly the one, it was the overachievement, okay, I'll volunteer after class, school. I mean, even in all of the friends groups, I was the one organizing. And I think a lot of it, looking back, it was so painful. I did not want to go to the depths of those places because who would?
Yeah.
And I did a really, really good job at it until I couldn't. And
At the coping.
Oh, the
or
coping. The
you
coping, the distraction, the
overcompensation.
overcompensation, the channeling. I mean, yes, in many ways, some people would say, but Neeta, you became a cosmetic dentist. You had this amazing, lavish life. You weren't even 30. You had your practice. It was over 7 figures, all of these things. That was great to the outside world. I even found love, but I did overcompensate even in a relationship. And I think that was the biggest compensation because I was so willing to sacrifice my self-worth for love, for a creation or this possibility of a creation of a new family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to loop up that part, which of course you tell the whole story in the book, but
oh yes, the beginning of the book.
And I'm gonna leave it there for people to go read the book because it is so powerful to read about resilience from somebody who is such a walking testament to what you call the bounce factor. Yeah. And I'm curious, because you are such a luminous human, you are so full of life. You're like this embodiment of joy. I mean, I know we don't know each other that well, but just it really is palpable. It really is palpable from your podcast to, your online presence and then in person. And we know so many people in common. And so, word on the street.
Word on the
matches
street.
who you are in person. It's incredible. And again, when I started your book, I never would have I was just like, what? I can't believe you've been through those things. And so I'm curious, do you think that the ability to have the bounce factor, as you call it, these different aspects of resilience, do you think that we are born with that? Do you think you just came in more resilient than others? Because there are many people who have been through far less than you have who are not thriving.
Yeah.
Why?
Yes, the question of the day.
That is the question.
The question of the hour. I mean, the question that gets me, I it's literally, I think, the question that is still up for grabs in, I think, every household, whether you're a mom and you're like, how do we teach resilience in kids? My husband and I, we were just talking about that because, spoiler alert, I did find love again and I am a mama of 2. And it's
the story. The end. It has a happy ending.
It does have a happy ending.
Yeah.
For those watching,
yeah. Or a happy middle, and I'm sure a happy ending as well.
Happy middle. And I think that so can it be taught? Yes, it can. Are certain people more predisposed to resiliency? I think now the research has shown, with the studies done with epigenetics, if we want to get into science.
I do, always. Yes.
Well, I mean, they've done tons of studies that those who have survived, the Holocaust or even the Rwandan genocide, if you take some of their biomarkers, they will have these resilient proteins in their DNA. And if you come across Mark Wolyn's work, who I forget the name of the book.
What's his last name?
Mark Wolyn, Dr. Mark Wolyn. It didn't start with you.
Okay.
And he talks about how, they've done the study in rats and just the generations of our trauma and our lineage, it makes you more predisposed to certain stress factors, which, okay, one can then argue and say, well, if you've had this in your lineage, maybe you are more prone to resilient times in your life. But the verdict is still out because also your environment, which we talk about in the bounce factor. So the first aspect of this is, well, are you okay with looking at your past and really forgiving your past in a way? So often we get stuck in our suck. We get stuck in our past circumstances.
Don't get stuck in your sock.
I mean, come on, that should be the title of the episode. Let's not get stuck in this. But the thing
It probably will be.
You're welcome. You're welcome. But I think so often that is the big plight for a lot of us, right? We have a breakup, we have we get fired, we don't get picked for the team, we get betrayed, you get trolled or bullied online, etc. It keeps on going and going, and then it really stops us in our tracks, and that's for a lot of people. And and that's probably why we do the work that we do, to help people get unstuck and move forward. So if you have this kind of group that is stuck in their suck, well, what are the things that we could do to help navigate that? Well, the first thing is okay, maybe you don't want to look back at your past, but can you forgive some of the things that you couldn't control? And, I talk about this, especially, in the second part of the book, around making peace with your past. And, for me, it looked like a lot of different healing modalities. Mm-hmm. And if you're just stumbling across this video or, this podcast and you're like, oh, I don't even know where to start. Well, just look at even some of the patterns of how you even make your daily decisions in your life. Are you one to ruminate over thoughts? Are you one to just, beat yourself up? Would that decrease your likelihood of being resilient and saying, okay, I'm going to start this thing up again? Are you more resistant to, failure? If you're going to start a project and, it's not going to work, are you going to say, all right, I'm going to just get back up again? Or peg yourself as, oh man, I'm just not cut out for this, or I'm never going to find love again. And there was a time where I thought that too. Never going to find love again. I don't think I'm going to have children. I don't think that's for me. I'm not worthy of it. And then it gets back into, the work that you talk about. Am I enough? Am I worth it?
Yeah.
Am I worthy? So we've got to do all of that excavation work in either our upbringing or in the past, things that didn't really work out. So that's the first part. But then the second part, and what researchers really talk about, is this idea of your environment. And this is the idea and the hot topic of epigenetics, which is, well, can you actually change your environment? If we look back at, Carol Dweck's work, I think she's the Stanford professor who really talks about mindset. And, well, two twins could have gone through the same hardship. One selected a growth mindset, and another, well, they were stuck in their circumstance.
Right.
And were they having maybe a different environment? Well, one grew up somewhere else and another grew up somewhere else. One had more of a supportive environment, perhaps, and one maybe didn't. They had more hardships, more struggle, or not the right community of support, right? And that's the biggest thing that can turn on or off.
And what they say, the folks.
The smart folks.
But what I've been reading about is how actually our environment will always beat out our will in terms of our desire. Like, we might want, for example, to get sober. But if we're hanging out with all drinkers, it literally, it's nearly impossible to overcome your environment. But flipped the other way, it becomes inevitable to have what you want when you change your environment. And I'm curious for you, as you were shifting things after you, I just really want to know a little bit more, actually, just from my, I'm just curious, and it'll answer the question probably. What happened when you decided to sell your really successful cosmetic dentistry practice? And then how did that transition happen into going into coaching? Because those are really different. Transformation is transformation. However,
True.
However, I would imagine the environment and the people you would be hanging out with as a dentist are possibly really different than the people you hang out with now.
So different.
And I just want to know that story.
Yeah. So, and this is I think, probably looking back at my weirdly unconventional path, never, ever, ever in a million years would I ever think, oh, yes, coaching. Yeah. going into dental school and taking all the tests to get in and being one of whatever the top students and all of those things.
There's a lot of, people who do intensive training like that for years and years and years and all the costs. Like, it cannot be an easy thing to just be like, I'm no longer going to use the education that I spent years of my life and hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Like, that's a big deal.
So
I know you know.
Was my family PO'd? Did they ask, are you in a cult? What are you doing? And it's interesting because as I said yes.
Are you in a cult?
that was the weirdest one. Are you in a cult? So as I started saying yes to new possibilities, to new opportunities, and I think I talk about this also, the third part of the book called, this is in flying forward, and I have a 5-step process for it. But first, we're falling, right? We have some sort of fall, a breakup, a resentment, a betrayal, something happens that really knocks us off of our feet, a diagnosis. In my case, it was a divorce. It was a earth-shattering divorce. And that was really the impetus for me to really look at everything. And that really had me literally wake up and say, I can no longer hide all of these feelings and emotions that I've been trying to keep this stoic face for over a decade, and just to try to keep the peace. And it was so chaotic. Hi, the subtitle of my book is How to Embrace the Joy in Chaos and Find Magic in the Mess. And so when my life was so chaotic and I thought I could just piece everything together as a, recovering perfectionist and cosmetic dentist because everything needed to be perfect by the millimeter.
So good.
It just...
Your teeth are amazing. Also, I just really want to
cute. Okay? But it's so wild because the things we think we can control, it just bursts and blows up in your face, and you're like, all right, I have to face this. And I remember even trying to hide just the messiness and the chaos of my divorce to my team, because at that point I was not a very confident business owner. I wasn't. I was living in fear. I was in my perfectionist mode. I was afraid of what people would think of divorce, because not only that, I had a lot of other things that I was hiding underneath my mattresses and my rugs, of the amount of loss and grief that was really unprocessed. And so it blew up in my face to say, okay, you're going to work on this now. You're not only going to work on this now, but it's also going to be during the most tumultuous bigness of a separation in a, toxic relationship, but you're going to find yourself. And you're going to find yourself because that's where, as scientists like to call that, post-traumatic growth. And it was almost like the pain had to get so bad where you are igniting. So you do have a choice. Do you go back to the same ring around and the same community that you've always been going to, or, maybe there's some sort of fire, there's an ignition, there's a flame that's like, all right, hey, there's a spark that's like, hey, you can go this way, something that you've never, ever done before in a million years. And for me, that was, leave the marriage, leave the community that I was with, leave all of the accolades and everything else, and actually say 3 words. And those 3 words were, I need help. And now for someone who is touted on pride and ego and, I love you medicine and I love you all my doctor, dentist friends, there's a lot of ego in those professions. And I was in that. And I was a young, super successful in that time. And I needed to ask a different question. And so that was really the beginning of my walk with awe and curiosity, and just, this is stage 3 of your flying forward of, all right, it's a combination of the bounce factor, because you're also recognizing that your current environment is probably not going to support whatever this new life that you're starting to build. I knew that I had to walk away from all that toxicity. And what I knew at my core at 16 years old, having people coming over my house, praying for my my dad, my brother, doing these prayer groups. And I grew up very, my dad was very spiritual, but I was also, Catholic, thanks to my mom. And
Oh, wow.
yes,
That's amazing.
yes, but we had so many different prayer groups coming in, especially during that time. But I just remember being the one always as a community builder, even from my teenage years. So I knew that even in this era and season of my life where I didn't even know what depression was, but I was all of those things because I'm like, I can't do this alone. I can, but I have no choice. I have to tell everybody what I'm actually going through. So then I said yes to all the therapists, all the chants that my dad used to do for 2 or 3 hours a day, because he was a devout meditator and he would chant the Hindu chants, and we would go to the gurdwaras growing up and all of the different houses of worship. I started going through all of the things and started saying yes to every single thing. It was a year of full yes. And improv was the biggest probably blessing in my life.
Improv.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Improv, because I was so deathly afraid of public speaking. I was so deathly afraid to share with my team that I was going through this madness of, I don't know what it is. I don't know if I can even pay the bills next month because I don't know if I can actually keep the doors open. So if you have to leave me, I guess I'll do this all on my own. The scariest words that were coming out of my mouth, but also gave me the biggest liberation because improv said, yes, and. And that was the greatest joy that I could give to myself during probably the deepest, darkest time of my life, because I was confronted with all of these mixtures of emotions and I had to real-time process, alchemize, and keep going. And so over those next 6 years, as I started to say yes to more help, more therapists, more guides, healers, shamans, practitioners, alternative therapy, holistic healers, everyone started showing up in my life. And I'm like, yes, I'm going to go to that retreat. Yes, I'm going to go to that conference. Yes. And then I started getting more support, which was in the hands of, all right, more consultants. How do I run this practice where I'm not even here? Oh, okay, I learned, all right, I could be a better leader, which means that I could just hire more docs, which means that I could not be there 6 days a week. I could be there 4 days, 3 days, 2 days, twice a month, once a month. Oh, fabulous. So I became really, really good at community building and inspiring vision, and then
building a business that would run without you,
and not
which is
having
incredible
to be there.
Yeah.
So then I started to say yes to other opportunities. I started to invest in female-led startups because I did have capital and I was single and I didn't want to go back to a toxic community that just went out on the weekends and just partied, and because that was that time of my life. It was my early 30s. I mean, what else are you supposed to do in Chicago? No offense, Chi-Town, I love you. And that was the beginning of saying yes to new things. And because I was so great at building community, and honestly, I needed a community that I could pour into, I started what we would call now a female mastermind. And it was professional women in Chicago. And it was, we would take because I was very much in my personal growth journey and taking all these different books. And so that's what it became. And we would meet monthly. The group grew to over 150 women in Chicago in my beautiful, tiny little living room. And I started saying yes to more things that were completely outside my realm, which was more conferences, more retreats. And then it ended up taking me to Stanford as a nonprofit management, because I started my nonprofit, Independent Awakening. And it was there, in Silicon Valley, in Palo Alto, where I learned all about startups, because I was trying to build this nonprofit called Independent Awakening, which was to build self-confidence with women and girls. And it was my tiny little rinky-dink nonprofit that was, championing self-love in high schools and colleges. And then I got to see that a lot of these professors were teaching business and startups and, you know, founders. And I'm like, wait, okay, I think I have a startup. I think this is so cool. How do I get more involved in this? So then I started to invest in women and girls and female founders. And then I realized that what I was actually doing was coaching.
Yeah.
So then I started to dive more into coaching and mentorship and leadership. And what I found was a lot of the things that I was already doing in my own practice, mentoring the doctors, mentoring the dentists, mentoring our team, that I wasn't even there. I was literally doing this for these startup founders who were raising tons of money. Yeah. And it's literally some of the building blocks that I'm even writing today in this book. And it's how do we rise up after these adverse events? Yep. Whether you're trying to raise $1 million, $2 million, $500,000, 20, 30 million from investors. And literally I was so blown away because they didn't even have a viable product. It was just all in a vision that they were creating in thin air.
Isn't it wild?
And that's when I'm like, wow, I need to move here.
To move here.
And that was literally the beginning of the next chapter, because I said yes to selling my practice, even though I had done a lot of really interesting things, like expanding it, like, buying the whole building. I mean, I thought, because other amazing people in my field at the time said, "You're so good at it. Why don't you just expand?" And it was more of like, ooh, what's my soul actually asking me to do? Is this really about money, or is this about going and spreading your wings in a different way? And I knew my time in Chicago was just completely done on an energetic soul level. And I needed to then, cut cords. And that's when my family thought I was nuts. They're like, how could you build such a strong footing, foundation? What are you doing? Oh, she's gone mad. She's gone crazy. Who is she dating now? Like, it was just a whole upheaval, because you have Filipino Indian family that are so rooted into collectivism and collective groupthink. And I love all of that, and I appreciate it so much. But I think it was time for me to really find my own. And so I sold my business to one of my junior dentists, which was a beautiful exit. Yeah. And it allowed me to then start the next chapter. Wow. And here we are.
How long ago was that?
8 years ago.
I mean, it's not that long ago.
It's not that long ago. But so here's what's funny. So everyone listening, here's what's interesting. When I let that go, and it was 2015 when I actually sold. Obviously, I was doing other things. My nonprofit started getting off the ground, and I was actually starting to get asked to speak more, and not on behalf of my nonprofit. So, I became a speaker obviously first, and I realized, oh, okay, this can be something. But when I said yes to taking the other path, and this is stage 4, when you're magnifying, right? As you fly forward, you're now blooming and blossoming, and you're just fully in flow because you're in alignment with who you really are. I mean, this is your soul's purpose, your soul's calling, your dharma. You're so in alignment that's when I would actually bump into my now husband. That's what I would bump into Ajit.
I was going to ask you how you met, so thank you for just filling that in for me.
I mean, we met in different parts of the world. We met at this event called A-Fest.
Yes, I've heard of it.
And that was a few years before I was quite ready. I was quite ready for a relationship, but we stayed friendly. And then that year, when I had sold my practice, I was like a free bird, flying all over the place. Had some capital. I don't know what I'm going to do next. I was actually researching for my very first book. And because I'm a science geek and a science nerd, I mean, that's just never going to go out of my mind. I literally started, meeting with people all around the world, scientists, shamans, leaders from, different various places all across the globe. And he was actually in Malaysia at the time. And we bumped into each other in Malaysia. And then a year later, we were both speaking at the same conference in India. So we never actually met in the US. It was always outside of the country. And so a year after, we started dating. And then a year after that, we had 9 unions across the globe.
Wow.
And then a year after that, I stepped into motherhood.
Oh my gosh.
As I share so vividly
Yes.
in the book.
I read that last night, your birth story, and I cried.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. There are some parallels with my first birth.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. It's really good.
I almost turned that into a moth story in a stand-up set.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm still tweaking it, but I think
I think it would be great.
I think I'm gonna turn it either moth / stand-up, because I feel like there's elements. Yeah. You could go really high, and then you could take it really low.
Oh my God. Wait, backing up?
Yes.
Did you go, so at what point did you sign up for an improv class? Mm-hmm. And how did that occur to you to do? Did somebody invite you?
So when you're ready, right? When you say yes, guides in your life appear.
Yes.
And so
guides, just to be clear, not guys.
Yes, guides. Excuse me. Guides do appear as well. You
guys
just
show
may
up
not be ready.
And guides.
You may or may not be ready, or that may be the path that you need to take. I think for me, they were in the form of guides, angels, as I like to call it. And what I really mean by that is, I met people in the forms of these amazing humans. And one of my girlfriends, shout out to Melissa, I had met her, we were training for a triathlon because I was very much into triathlons at the time. I've always used movement and just working out as just a way of resetting myself, and it's become a really big practice. Not so much triathlons, but just movement in general. I can only do so many of those. And this was when I was trying to build new friendships, and she was like, you know what? I'm doing this thing at Second City.
Yeah.
And that's, for people who don't know, Second City in Chicago, that's where a lot of the big greats who go off to Saturday Night Live, I mean, everyone should know, it's kind of like the Harvard of
very big deal
of SNL, and they go off and create these careers. And so, and I've always, when she even said the word improv, I would just, I like closed up. I'm like, no, there's no way. And she's like, no, you're gonna love it. She's like, no, I'm taking you. Just say yes. And I was like, no way. We have to be funny. I had zero idea what this was. And so she's like, please I think you're really gonna love it. I think it's just great people. We just have fun and we act like a bunch of kids. And so I'm like, all right, fine. So I signed up. And of course, it literally changed my world. Yeah. And yes, there were people that, of course, wanted to go and be on stage, and improv is different than stand up, very different. It's all about being present and all about being a yes and just being able to play. And for the first time, literally ever in my life, I was just allowed to play, and that was the beginning of really maybe even falling in love with my inner child, and just being able to give myself permission to play. Yeah.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that led me to stand-up comedy.
So you also did stand-up?
I have, yes.
Yes.
I've 3 classes, yes.
Oh my gosh. So our mutual friend Vasavi was trying to convince me that I should do stand-up, because she was like, you're really funny. And I was like, I'm not funny. I do love to laugh. Those are 2 different things. I like funny people.
No, you would be great.
She was like, no, you should do stand-up. Anyway,
you would be great. Can we both do a 5-minute set? Come on.
That sounds like I really would rather die
Stop.
than doing that. Yeah. So maybe, I don't know. We'll see. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes.
In your book, you talk about entitlement. And you speak about the difference between entitlement and privilege and the intersections of the 2. And I'm just curious, I've never read anything or heard anything that was so powerful in terms of like identifying what entitlement actually is. And it is rampant, obviously. I mean, I'm sure it's rampant everywhere. But can you talk about like what entitlement is and what might end up being entitlement that we don't think is entitlement? Because I think that as I was reading this, I was like, oh, I can see how this has shown up in my life. I can see how it's shown up in clients' lives. And I have not seen folks talking about it so much. And I'm glad you are.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know.
So this is huge because, I mean, and this was another, it still is a big thing because I think, we've probably talked about it offline in terms of even hiring talent for our teams. And it's a big thing that I talk about now just in general conversations with people, depending on who they're hiring as talent. And some would argue and say some of the newer generation, Gen Z, is quite entitled. We've had these conversations of they have these ideals of what they want, their expectations. We've had this whole idea of the quiet quitting, and I think also because we're so global as a company. And I get to visit family in India. We go to Dubai quite a bit. I have team members all over the world. It's very interesting to see the differences in people who are, either from the States versus other places in the world where they need to really put food on the table. They need to feed their families. They're coming from a different place and they're like, I'm ready to work. I'm ready to, put sweat in the game, put skin in the game. And entitlement really is coming from a place of lack. And so, if you're coming from a place of lack and you think that, there's not enough room at the top, or I'm just not going to share that information because there's not enough to go around. Well, we're going to start hoarding things because we think that there's not enough for everybody. There's plenty, but there's plenty for us to thrive in. Yeah. And so it's interesting that we are in this dynamic, and it comes in quite a bit when we're talking about entitlement versus manifestation. And, when we're talking about manifestation, it is coming from a place of abundance and love. So there's a different attunement or frequency to it. Of course, in the book, I list a ton of differences between entitlement and privilege and how to really know. And a lot of us are. We all are, and we've all acted entitled. This morning, when I was trying to catch my 6 a.m. flight so I could be here, I run late to the airport. I'm not going to lie, I do. And I'm that person. And there's always one in the relationship. My husband's like, nope, we're going to get there early. We're going to get there because I want to make sure I'm at peace, waiting to be called and waiting to line up in that beautiful line. Yeah. And I'm like, why would you waste time? Who would waste time to wait and see all the people line up? Like, just roll in when you're
just make a smooth transition.
Just smooth.
Car, security, gate, board.
That's it. Yeah. So
no stopping.
So of course, he was not very happy this morning when I decided to snooze an extra 15 minutes as I would. And we know this is one of the things that we fight about in our relationship. Sorry. Real-time updates. IRL. This is what we do on the Brave table, so it's coming here too. So we got there and I realized, I'm like, oh, okay, there's a lot more people flying today, so there's a lot more people in line. And he just hates it when you're cutting in line. Yeah. Okay, folks. So I said, we're running late. Like, our flight's gonna board in 5 minutes. Yeah. And he just looks at me and he's like, you do this every time. when are you going to learn? And so I said, excuse me, I'm so sorry. We got to just. So what I speak about in the book is
This is perfect.
that is entitlement.
Asking to go ahead in the airline.
That's an example.
Right.
That's an example. Okay, you see, you see some, there's traffic and you're getting to pick up your kids and you're probably late. I am that person too. And so what are you going to do? You're going to drive on the shoulder and pass all those people that are waiting their turn in line just so you can cut. Who does that? I know I'm not the only one.
My husband does that, but it makes me nervous. So I usually don't, unless I've spaced out and like forgotten to get over, which I did do the other day. And then I was like thinking about you. I was like, this is me being entitled. I'm cutting in front of other people. But I was like, if I keep driving and I don't do this, I'll miss my exit. My kids are waiting for me. And it was my fault that I missed getting over when I should have.
Correct.
And so then I was having entitlement of like, let me just nudge in here. Let me put my hand out the side window and wave. Hi.
And say, hi, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. So you gave this example of entitlement of someone you were working with, and I'm sure it was some amalgamation of a variety of clients, but we'll pretend it was one person.
Right.
Bob. I don't know the name. Anyway, that was like wanting their business to grow like now. Mm-hmm. And you were asking these questions, maybe I'm conflating examples, but you were asking these questions of like, but what's the impact you want to make? What's the value you want to provide? Like, how do you want to be of service? And this person was just like, I just need to be famous now, right? And so we see this, especially like in the personal development industry, in the coaching industry, like somebody will join a program and then when they are, don't have 500,000 followers in 3 months, they're like, this doesn't work.
This doesn't work.
I should
How dare you?
And I'm like, I've been literally running my business since I was 14. Like it took a minute, And so I think we can all watch out for, yes, the airline line example is like a funny one, but it shows up in these really intense ways. Yeah. Do you think that entitlement actually blocks us from manifesting?
Oh, 1,000%, because it's rooted in the frequency of lack. And there's a little bit, so in that example, and I remember the person that we're talking about vividly. So in the example that I shared, and this is many.
I'm sure.
I'm sure you've had them as well. And here is the issue with that. When we think, because we've been seeing somebody's work or we've been inspired by their books, and then they say yes because they see something, in themselves, and it turns on the ignition for them that like, yes, I'm gonna do all of these things and I'm gonna sign up for the program. I'm gonna put in the work. But then what we're really asking is, well, what is your real intention? And 9 times out of 10, they don't really know. Because what we're seeing right now, and this is the issue, is because everything is conflated on social media, and it's the highlight reel, and it's the fancy cars, and the beautiful images, and all of these things. But we're not really thinking, who is this for? How's my story going to impact people? And are you doing this for the pomp and show, the fame? Or are you actually doing this because you want to add value to people's lives? And so in this particular example, that person just wanted to see numbers and lots of followers. I'm like, what are you going to do with those followers? No, I just want that. Okay. When you got to the root of it, it was so that this person could feel validated and feel seen and feel loved and feel heard. Okay, but it started with, I just need to be famous. Okay, for why? And it's not going to get there if the root cause is because for the fame. And if I don't have that, then, I want a refund, or or you're not great, or all of these things, and you're kind of like, well, let's rewind and why are you even putting content out today? What are you doing this for? And I think, we have a responsibility, even just as I'm sharing this, because I think of our kids too, when they start to put themselves up. Why are you going to share your lives online? Like, what is that purpose? And fine, we can get into the metrics. Okay, well, to entertain, to add value, or to educate. But really, let's get to the root of it. Are we really going to manifest from a place of, okay, I need to be seen. I just want to be loved. I want to be heard. So, yeah.
We, I think, live in strange times in terms of social media, the media, the ability to create a platform just yourself without, it just used to be that like you had to be picked by another media outlet to get that, and which I think was like, would so much prefer now. Yeah. That anyone can just be like, I'm doing this. I'm going for it. Like, you don't have to wait for Oprah to ask. You don't have to wait for the Today Show.
Right.
You don't have to wait for any of that. You just choose yourself, get at it.
Yeah.
And
yes,
as you so beautifully articulated, we have this conflation of numbers of email subscribers, followers on social media, with being important, with being valued and loved, and also with money and happiness.
Oh gosh, yes.
And like, I'm just really curious because you are working in front of the scenes with your own business, and then also like, Ajit's business, and you have multiple, you guys have a lot going on. I'm sure I know a very small percentage. And, you partner with Sahara on the Higher Self Institute and all these different things, right? So you're like out there, but you are also behind the scenes, I know, with some pretty heavy hitters. Yeah. What do you see that like we're doing as a culture around associating vanity metrics, I'll just use that phrase, or fame, being well known, with all of these things? And like, what have you found as an antidote to that conflation, both in yourself, but also in our industry? Like, how can we navigate it consciously without getting sucked in, staying awake, staying on purpose, all that?
I think it really, so if you are inspired by this conversation, ask yourself what made you get inspired? What was it? That maybe it's our energy, it's our joy bubble that we create every time we're together. But I think that's the biggest thing is, let's go back to our intention of what is it? What does it make, or what makes you attracted or really excited to follow someone in today's time? And I think what we're seeing in the way we pick talent to work with a lot of times is their integrity. Yeah. And, there's a lot about authenticity, but are they unapologetic in who they stand for and what they stand for? And, in whatever freak flag, uniqueness, weirdness, whatever it is that do they fully own it 100%? Yeah. And if you're looking to be a creator, and if you're looking to, you're like, maybe, I have a story, because, we all have a story. We all have a story, but you're saying, what can I do with that story? Can my story help somebody? Okay, ask yourself this question. Maybe your story can, and I think that everybody does, and we obviously teach this even at Highest Self Institute, when you're actually in alignment with your Dharma. And, in Highest Self Institute, when you are in full alignment with who you are becoming, then you don't care about what other people say or think. You're not following the vanity metrics. You're not trying to do what everybody else is doing. Maybe you're looking because you're like, oh, this is cool. But ask yourself this, would this work for what I want to create? Would this work for this stage and season of my life? Mm-hmm. And why, ultimately, why are you doing the things that you're doing? This year, I actually asked myself this question of, where do I want to put effort and time? Because now my kids are getting older. Yeah. I do travel a lot. And my husband and I, we travel a lot, and I feel like there is just this pull of more connected, meaning deep connected relationships that we're craving. And I think that there is just no extra time for the shiny objects, I should say. And so, and ask yourself, is this a shiny object? Like, what are you chasing? Or is this something that you're thinking about that you can do for 5 or 10 or 15 years? Because we see a lot of people want to do this because of X, Y, and Z, but they're not thinking of 5 years down the line or even 10 years down the line. And I know somebody like you've been in it for a really long time. You're one of the OGs. And to see, I think, a lot of where the industry is going, we just have to be, I think people are actually being more cautious and careful of who and what is the real deal.
I hope so.
I think so.
I think so too.
I think so because there's only a while where the superficial stuff kind of just falls flat, and those who have been consistent, I think, from day one, and consistency is the biggest metric. Doesn't matter if you've got 5,000 followers, but if you have 3,000 or even 300 of those avid fans that are going to be with you, and they're opening up your emails, and they're literally lit up with how you show up. That's great. Celebrate that. Of course, as they say, the riches are in the niches, right? But what I really take in that is we're getting into a time where now with AI, all we will have is our communities. And damn, you got to be really good at building community in whatever way you can, whether it's online. And yes, we get all sorts of turned on by all of these vanity metrics online, but people are craving to be in person.
Yes.
That's why you came to Austin to see me, and that's why I'm here to see you. And I think that we're gonna
it's the best.
Be bringing more of that into play, and that's what. And so, if you're watching this and you're like, "Oh, I really love these people online," find out if they're having a live event. Find out if they're having a live workshop. Go, because I think that's going to be the difference. People are craving community.
People are craving community.
And deep connection.
Yes. And when you get around people, I think you can tell online too, but our bodies know if it's a match or not, just in terms of, because of the electromagnetic field of the heart, we can just tell if someone's a frequency match or not. It becomes very easy to magnetize your people to you if you can show up in person. And if you can't, for whatever reason, showing up as much as you can online
1,000%
is excellent. So as we wrap this up, community has been a through line for you since you were young, and I'm curious if folks are wanting to build their own communities and build that intimacy and build that deep connection, what would you want to pass along to them as some wisdom that you've gathered over the years?
Oh my gosh. Well, I have how to create your soul support posse.
Oh, fantastic.
And that is a free guide that I will give your community as well. And that'll be linked in the show notes. But it's a 16-page guide. And what I love and what I've found so much, because I've built communities all over the world, is to the biggest thing is don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to reach out, and you'll know with people who are actually real and authentic and want to get to know you. And like you said, if it's a match, a vibration match, an energetic match, you're going to know right away. And I always say it's hard even as moms to find friendships and relationships. And when you're trying to build community online in the DMs, it can get inauthentic pretty darn quick. I can't tell you the number of people who, try to ask for things or they show up in the DMs and it's like a crafted message and it's not real. And I'm the one that's like, all right, I'm going to leave a voice note. Yeah. Because sometimes I'm just like, on the walk, doing the dishes, whatever.
Finding two thumbs is hard at the same
hard.
time.
I can't do that. I'm not for that. No. Voice note all the time. And then you can actually see the genuineness.
True.
In my opinion. So don't be afraid to leave voice notes. Do not be afraid to get rejected.
Yes.
I think that's the biggest thing. Because, and these micro rejections are not going to just be the first time. It could be second, third times. We just don't know what people are going through. And I can't tell you this enough, even in our communities, the number one thing that holds people back, even from throwing a dinner party or gathering soul sisterhood friendships, for tea or coffee or whatever, is what if nobody shows up? And this could be, your first yoga, whatever, in person, whatever you want to do. What if nobody shows up? Well, what if two people show up and you get to build connections and bonds with two people? It starts like that.
I literally went to an event last night where it was like raining. And once you live in Miami, when there's a big rainstorm, you know that everyone turns into a huge weenie. And I couldn't believe this when I moved here because I was like, I'm from Maine. We drive in blizzards. And then cue to me last night. I'm like, oh, it's raining. I don't want to go. But I'm texting my girlfriend. And I was like, we said we were going. We are rallying. I'll pick you up. So we show up at the event. We were the only two people there. Then two other stragglers came in. We had the best time. Yeah. And those relationships that were formed, I know will carry on. The conversation was really deep, really meaningful. We've already all connected afterwards in less than 24 hours. Super duper worth it. And the person who was throwing the event did not have any kind of which way story about it. I loved it. It was so refreshing. It's not that they didn't care, but there wasn't they were like, great, you're here.
Yeah.
Amazing. I was so happy.
You don't need, I feel like sometimes we overthink things.
Yeah.
And
we make it mean things. Yeah. And she wasn't making it mean anything. And I freaking love witnessing people not making shit mean anything. It's very, very freeing, right?
It's plenty.
Yeah, it is plenty. It is totally plenty. Oh my God, this has been so much fun.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you for coming.
You're the best.
Thank you for coming to Miami. Where can people find you? Obviously, they need to go get themselves a copy of That Sucked, Now What?
Absolutely.
Really fantastic read. Very helpful. Again, I just want to pinpoint your ability to articulate the difference between victimization, victim mindset, the difference between entitlement, privilege. There's a lot of nuance in here that I think people gloss over that you nailed. So get the book. Where else should they find you?
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I spent a lot of time on Instagram. So Neeta Bhushan on Instagram, and we are top 50 in mental health, the Brave Table. So, and you'll find Kate's amazing interview there too. That was fun.
That was a fun one.
That was so fun.
I'm so excited to be teaching a workshop for the first time at the Omega Institute in beautiful Rhinebeck, New York, October 18th through 20th, called More Than Enough. During the weekend workshop, we are going to dig into healing and accessing more abundance for time, energy, and money from an energetic, emotional, nervous system, and practical standpoint. There will be somatic practices, there will be journaling, there will be lecture, there will be dancing, and at the end of the workshop, you will have tapped into your access point for an experience of plenty in your life, specifically when it comes to time and money. If you want to know more to come join me for that workshop, head over to katenorthrup.com/omega. I'll see you there.